And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power Man Podcast. My name is Rory Paquette. I am your ever grateful host. Thank you so much, folks, for being here today. If you're not out there doing everything that you're doing, folks, I can't sit here and do what I'm doing. You're out there subscribing, you're liking, you're sharing, you are sending DMs, hand over fist. You are following our guests. You are sending messages to them. You're listening to their podcast as well. Folks, you stepped up. And I cannot thank you enough. Thank you to Power of Man Nation and to our private group, the Power of Man Within. You folks have been fantastic. We're going to get going here in just a minute. This is an absolutely fantastic guy we got on with us today. You guys are going to love it. You're going to love him. You're going to love his story. Before we do that, you guys all know what we got to do. You got to pay some bills. So let me take a sip of my preferred beverage. You guys all know. Really good stuff right there. Deep, dark, rich, bold, and beautiful. Just like my wife. That's right. It's Freedom Hill Coffee. At Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Go check them out. Look them up. Folks, they do all the right things for all the right reasons. They brew a mean cup of joe. They support veterans, which is huge here at the Power Man. You guys all know that. And it's one of the biggest reasons why we support them. So go check them out. Freedom Hill Coffee. At Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Tell them Power Man sent you. Let me get one more sip of this so I can keep up with this young buck on the other side of the table from me. Oh, there we go. There we go. Man, good stuff. I will be drinking that throughout the episode. So you guys will hear me sipping on that absolute fantastic brew. Here we go. Father, lawyer, man of faith, founder of the Backward Design Blueprint and the Life Template. Please welcome to the show, Nate Turner. Nate, how you doing, sir?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Well, so am I. Appreciate you coming on here. Nate, before we get into all this other stuff about you, and I mean,
Mhm.
I've got a big list of things that are all about you here. Go ahead and tell our audience who is Nate Turner, what are you about, and what brings you here today, brother?
Real short. Who am I? I am the son of Tommy and Gladys Turner. I am a product of Gary, Indiana. I am the husband of Latanya and the father of Naeem. And I usually say it in a different way because I try to free myself of attachment. So I would say there's a guy named Naeem who calls me dad, and there's a woman named Latanya who calls me husband. And there's a lady named Gladys who still calls me son. My father, unfortunately, is gone. He's no longer with us in presence, but certainly here in spirit. So that's who I am, and whoever I am to other people, that's for them to decide. I freely believe that the word "who" is the most important word in human language, and we so often minimize it and don't quite understand it. That who we are is based solely on the relationships we have with the people that are part of our life. And when my time is over and when your time is over, someone else will determine who we are. They will write it in our obituary. They will speak it at our eulogy if they care to have something that remembers us. And then they will leave it as the last words that appear on our tomb or urn. So who I am, Rory, will be for you to decide when this episode is over.
Wow. I mean, honestly, that might be the deepest introduction anybody's ever given themselves on my show. I absolutely love that.
All
I
right.
love that, man. I mean, is that part of your process is determining, who you are
Yeah.
and working through that?
So I this thing I call it the three lenses of who. And I'd say to people all the time that the person that I think I have the greatest relationship with is my son. And you could ask me, hey, what is Naeem? His name is Naeem. What does Naeem think of you? And I might say to you, from my lens, Rory, I'm the greatest father in the whole world. And you can say, hey, well, hold on, Nate, I'm a pretty good dad myself. And I say, no, 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 Rory, no, I am the greatest father in the whole wide world. And then you say, well, okay, Nate, great, but what does your son think of you? And I would say, I believe my son thinks I'm the greatest father in the whole wide world. And then you might talk to my son and say, hey, well, what do you think of your dad? And he might say, he's an absolute jerk. And then who am I? I'm not who
Wow.
I believe I am because I've defined myself as a father. And so because I've defined myself as a father, it is the son who gets to decide what kind of father I am. So if he says I'm a jerk when my time on this planet is up, you better be sure that when he's crafting my obituary or thinking about what he wants to say in my eulogy, or if he wants to bother to put something on the tomb or urn about me, it will indicate that I'm far less than who I said I was. So I'm very mindful that that the people on the end, the people who you help, who you serve, and who you make sure their lives know that they matter, are the people who tell who you are, not me.
I don't know whether to be thoroughly impressed and fascinated or just depressed to the point of tears at this point.
No.
It's-
Be both. A
I
little
mean,
both.
that's really an interesting standpoint, though, because I can see it. As you're talking, it's like the tumblers in my brain are sort of clicking away, and I'm going, only your children, can say what sort of father you were because you weren't
Mm,
a father to anyone else.
that's correct.
Only your wife can say to the world what sort of husband you are because you
That's correct.
weren't a husband to somebody
Mm,
else.
right.
That's fascinating when you think about it that way. Now, thinking that way, what does
Mhm.
that do to your everyday worldview of yourself and your own accomplishments or lack thereof, possibly?
Yeah. So in terms of like my relationship with people, so when I think about who, and the folks who know me well enough know that I say every day, I write this in a journal. Every day I write my life as I'd like it to be in the first 20 minutes of the day, not as it is. So some people journal and they do it um, commiserating something that happened in the past. I don't. I journal from the lens of what my best me would look like. And my best me always is a person who helps, a person who serves, and a person who makes sure other people know their lives matter. And that's how I approach who I am. I'm supposed to help. I'm supposed to be in service to other people. And when people come in contact with me, they're supposed to leave knowing that their lives matter, at least to somebody. And if that only one person, that person should be me.
That's bold, and I like it. Now, at the end of every day, you're left then to the thoughts and feelings of others to determine whether or not you've succeeded in that.
True, but we all are, right? If I'm in a world and you got a lion behind you, I told you I'm a big fan of Mufasa, so I was thinking about Mufasa, and I was saying we are part of the great circle of life. That we are indeed part of the great circle. The circle can't be great if we're not all mindful that we're responsible to something and someone other than ourselves. So yeah, every day it could be depressing. I could have had a terrible day, and people could have said I didn't do a good job of making sure that they knew that they were valued. If I get another day, then the next day I have to figure out how to be better than I was the previous day.
Is this idea that you're talking about now, is this part of the premise that your programs are built on?
Yeah, I ask parents as an example. I ask parents that to stop focusing so much as an example. We do work with families around getting their kids to great schools, but I ask parents to stop focusing so much on the destination of a school and spend more time figuring out who you'd like your child to be if the world were perfect.
Hmm.
Right. And
Okay.
that's the approach that I took with my son before he was born. My wife and I wrote Harvard for an application and took the application apart and said I was a law student at Valparaiso, a struggling law student. So you said I'm a lawyer. Yes, I have a law degree. I do not practice. I shall never practice. But
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. But I was struggling. I didn't have a job. I finished, somewhere midway in my class. I worked on my master's in history and theology. So that was the sort of the saving grace of that experience. But I realized at the time I didn't have a job, and I thought, well, what could have made my life different? And I thought, well, if I attended a different university, maybe if I had gone to Harvard Law School, of course, someone would have hired me. They would have cared less about my grades. They would have just said Nate Turner from Harvard Law School. In fact, that's the way you'd have introduced me, or Harvard lawyer Nathaniel Turner. So I thought, well, the one thing I can at least do for a child is make it so that a child has an opportunity that a school won't laugh at him or her, because we didn't know we were having when they submit an application. So we looked at the Harvard application, and there, of course, the academic part stuck out. But there are two other great things that occurred from that. And the second of those things was that Harvard was looking for students that were world citizens, and this was 1994. And the third thing Harvard said they were looking for was people who cared for something greater than themselves. And so that became the template for
Hmm.
for the child's life. And that essentially is the template which I subscribe to parents all the time. You can raise kids who are intellectually ambitious. We certainly should do that. Who can think critically, that's all very important. But getting them to a great school, so what? There's a lot of people who go to great schools and make no contributions in the planet. Can we raise people who who can contribute to the overall well-being of the planet, who can be culturally and globally competent and talk to people and understand the connections between humanity all over the world? And then can we raise people who care about something greater than themselves?
Interesting. The idea of getting the application ahead of time, picking that apart, is that what the backward design is based on, or is it a part of it? It sounds
Yeah,
like it
so
kind of
it's a
jives together.
it's a part of it. It happens. So now the interesting thing is I've had folks, adults, even ask me, can you backward design a life, at 40? And it's like, well, yeah, because it's just like a GPS. If Rory, you and I decide to meet, let's say we're going to meet downtown at Lucas Oil Stadium, and assuming neither one of us knew how to get there and we needed to use a GPS, the GPS would give you instructions on how to get there. It would give me instructions on how to get there. Our instructions would be different, but you and I would end up at the same place. And if we did it, we wanted to time it so we arrived at the same time, we could do that as well. And that's all backward design is. It's saying, where are you now and where is it that you want to go? And then let us craft a roadmap to help you get there.
It seems like that would be very different in terms of crafting that backward design for a newborn,
Mm-hmm.
moving forward, as opposed to, taking someone who is 40
Right.
and saying, where do I want to be by 50?
That's true.
It seems like those would be very different steps, and yet you seem to be putting it together there a little bit. So what am I
I,
missing?
well, the thing you're missing is you're thinking about the two age bands. So yes, an unborn child and parents of a new child you might say, hey, what do you want for your children? Too often I hear parents say stuff like, well, I just want my baby to be happy. Yeah, no, I don't like what does happiness look like? Like, let's drill that. What does that mean? Let's drill down to what that might mean. I know you're not going to, a child is going to have its own thoughts and opinions at some point, but at the stage in which a child is willing to do what you want them to do, what is it that you would want a child to do? What would you want their life to look like? Then let's start crafting that. So, as an example, if a parent says to me, hey, Nate, I want my child, real case that recently had a parent say to me, I want my child to attend MIT. And I said, okay, great. So now I think he's 8. So now let's take a look at what his academic background is as an 8th grader. And we can extrapolate where he is right now to find out if he's on track to meet the standards of MIT. And if he's not, then there are things we need to do. He needs to improve his math scores. He means he may need a math tutor. He may need to take, I won't say the name because we don't need to publicize people who are not paying you for your show, but there are companies that help kids with math. I might say, hey, this is free, so I can say this. You might take the year-end Khan Academy course assessment. Your child's a 3rd grader, but you don't know if he is actually ready for 4th grade math. So let's take the 3rd grade assessment. So that's all the same. The 40-year-old, this is a real example, had a 40-year-old school teacher who said to me she was not happy with her life. And I said, well, what does that mean? She says, I want to do something else. And I said, well, what else do you want to do? She says, I want to have a say in what happens in the classroom. I said, okay, cool. What does that mean? She says, I should probably be a principal. I said, well, do you think that really gives you a say? And she says, well, no, maybe I should be a superintendent. I said, great. What do you need to be a superintendent? And she says, I don't know. So we go look. Hey, most superintendents have a doctorate degree and have a doctorate degree in educational leadership. Great. Now, what do we need to go to school to do that? So then we look, we find the schools that match. And then, strangely enough, she doesn't know how to study to pass the test. So now we have to teach her how to take the test. So she can. So 3 years ago, she finished her PhD. And now she is a principal of a large school district in Illinois. And I think her next step is to try to become a superintendent. But yeah, it works the same. The process is the same.
Nice. Interesting. Okay. So these are clients of yours that you're working with? This is a coaching program of some kind?
Yeah, I work with sometimes parents individually, sometimes with schools or corporations. But yeah.
Really? The school
Mhm.
will bring you in and you'll be dealing with more than one child, so to speak.
And recently working with schools on how to do parent engagement because they don't know how to do that either. And the approach to parent engagement is the same. I use for everything in my life, Rory, I use backward design. I always ask myself, well, where is it that you want to go? Because that's what we do every time we get in the car, every time we get in a plane. The pilot has to define where we want to go. And then the pilot, hopefully, unless we're going to Newark, that might be an issue. I just came from there. That's an issue. That's an
I'm
issue.
sorry. Yeah, they've had a couple issues here lately.
I can assure you. I just left there. I promise you. I know that. But we decide where we want to go, and then we work our way backward to that destination, and so it doesn't change.
Excellent. We probably should apologize for a couple of Indiana guys, sitting down here teasing Newark. So, all my friends in the East Coast, no offense. I mean, we're just current events guys. I mean, what do you want to hear? You want
Yep.
quiet and nice and
Current
easy?
events.
Move to
And my son
Indiana.
lives there now.
So,
Well, my son lives there, so I got love for Jersey City, for Newark, and all those places. So
nice, 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 nice. All right, love it. Okay, so that is the backward design. The life template, is that part of the backward design? How does that fit in? What's that about?
yeah, so the life template is essentially asking three questions or recognizing that there's three elements. So I don't know what year it was, so I'm not gonna pretend I know the exact year this happened. But a professor at Vanderbilt University some years ago started this educational process called backward design, and they would take. I won't bother to explain that. I'll just say this: for us, it is composed of three things. One is familiarity, the second is mastery, and the third element is core. So what I ask parents, okay, too often if something happens to a child, somebody else in the media will tell everybody who that child was. It's an unfortunate thing that happens all the time. The media will come in and they'll start looking up the background of a child, and if a child is involved in a shooting, they'll tell you all of the bad things about the child. And I was like, listen, I'm kind of troubled by that. So the way maybe we mitigate that is to ask parents who you want your child to be at their core. Who do you want them to be? You pick three or four qualities. If you were giving an elevator speech and you had 30 seconds to tell someone who your children were, not what they do, but who they were at the core of their being, what would you say? So that's the central element. The two, if you imagine three curves, the largest curve on the outside is familiarity. You have children, and you know that the more engaging your children are, the more stuff they know, the more people seem to want to help them with it, whatever. Those children, those kids are so precocious. I love talking to those little kids. They know so much. They're so much fun. So the ideal is to make sure children are as familiar with as many things as possible. A jack of all trades, if you will. Inside of that curve is circle, I should say, is a thing called mastery. And where there are certain things that we have to master. Hopefully, kids are mastering math and science and reading and writing, maybe STEM subjects today. But we also want them to master civility. We want them to master respect, etc. So there's that. And then again, I said at the very center is the core. So that's what we work with families to understand, that the life template is about preparing those children in that regard, so that when they approach what we call a buffet of life, nobody gets to decide for them that they can only be on one end of the buffet. As I mentioned, I'm from Gary, and people probably thought if I give the buffet food as an example, people would say, "Hey, send Nate down there where there are peanut butter and jelly and bologna sandwiches." And on the other end of the buffet is filet mignon and Dom Perignon and caviar. And it was like, no, no, Nate doesn't belong down there. Well, my objective is to make it so that a child can choose. And if you like peanut butter and jelly, you want to stay down here, great. But no one will ever be able to tell you that you're not competent, that you're not capable, that you haven't mastered stuff, that you're not familiar with enough things, that who you are at the core of your being is not good enough to be on this other end of the buffet.
Okay. I love what you're saying. Um, Having raised three kids and being an empty nester now, we raised our
Ah,
kids with
congrats.
well, thank you. We raised our kids with a very similar idea. I mean, not to the letter, of course, but we had plans, and
Sure.
we wanted to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
we guided them to certain accomplishments, a lot like what you're talking about, so that they had all of the
Mm-hmm.
opportunities they could possibly have available to them, and could make their own choices.
Correct.
What I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed, because I've coached for a very long time, is that most parents don't think about anything that you and I are talking about right now, because it's so much of, let the kid be a kid and they're going to figure it out. And honestly, I think it's just the parents taking the easy way out and not taking any responsibility for the kid.
Agreed.
Okay. So I mean, on this program, you're talking to a lot of dads. All
Mm-hmm.
right. You're talking to a lot of dads who I really believe, especially here in our audience, a lot of dads who want to do better, for their kids. Okay. They don't
Mm-hmm.
want to be the dad who, goes home, drinks a beer, watches Netflix, falls asleep, and doesn't have any idea what's happening with their kid. They want to be the intentional dad.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you say to them in terms of these programs? Like, how would these programs help them to be better fathers, to connect more with their sons and daughters? I think you know where I'm going with this. What
Yeah,
can we say
yeah.
to the parents to get them more involved in something like what you're talking about?
Okay. So I'm going to start with the first thing, which is to acknowledge that as a nation, because this is the only nation I've ever lived in, so I can't speak about another nation, but as a nation, we do a poor job of preparing parents to parent. Here's what I mean. You've got three children,
Hmm.
right? So three times you went to the hospital for your wife to deliver a baby, and within 36 hours or so after said delivery, the folks come and say to you, "Hey, you ain't got to go home, but you got to get that up out of here," and they give you the peace sign and they send you away,
Pretty much, yeah.
right?
Right.
So the 9 months leading up to the time that you were going to be parents, we don't do anything about child rearing. Nothing. We might, for a small piece, tell you about childbirth, and we give you a Lamaze class.
Yep.
So we tell you how to eat ice chips, how to breathe, all of these different things. But the moment the child is born, I knew more about putting in a car seat than I knew about being a parent. So that is a huge flaw and a failure. And what we do then is set parents up to just outsource everything to other people. So I don't necessarily blame parents
Hmm.
because this is the system that we've evolved to. But now, given that you know that, then your question is, what do you do differently? Then you begin at the beginning, right? And you begin by looking backwards. If the world were perfect and your child could be or do anything, what is it that you want for them? And then what will be your role in that? I understood, as I've said to you with this backward design process, that one of the things I needed to do to get my son to have the kind of life that maybe afforded him an opportunity at Harvard was to be better myself, right? Because I believe in trees and fruit. And so it's unfair for me to ask my son to be great and his daddy to be average. It's impossible. I've never seen a peach tree deliver an apple, and I've never seen an apple tree deliver mangoes. The tree produces the fruit that matches it. So I figured, hey, I've got to be better. So that's one of the things I would say to fathers. Don't put all the onus on your child. Put some of the onus on you. If you're better, it's very likely that your children will be better. If you're not better, it's most likely that your children will be quite opposite of what you hope them to be.
Hmm. I like that. I mean, I like that it's accountability, on
Yeah,
us as fathers to have to step up and do that. That's
yeah.
huge. Um, I'd like to backtrack for a minute if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely.
You mentioned, I mean, that you had the degree in law, of course, but then you went on to say you got your master's in theology.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing that faith plays a pretty large role in your life.
Yeah, yeah, but I'm not one of those people who. So I believe in sort of in words and deeds, and I usually speak less about, hey, I'm a person of faith, and I would just say, well, hopefully, that my little light will shine enough that you know who I am. So yes, I have a master's in history and theology. At the time in law school, um, it may be too much to say, but I had this call on my life, or had this thing that suggested that I should do something additional with my time. And I went to the graduate school of Valparaiso and asked them, hey, can I just take a class? I just need to know something more. I got something going on and I can't get no answers for this. Can I take a class? And Rory, when I got there, the advisor had created a curriculum for me to earn a degree.
Wow.
There was no master's degree in history and theology at the university. They created one for me. So when I graduate and the president announces me, he calls me last. Of course, my last name is Turner, but there was some people with U and V that he called and W. And I was like, what's going on? Am I actually going to get this degree or what? He says, hey, ladies and gentlemen, you got a gentleman who's done something never been done at this university. And he says my name. and says he's earned both of these degrees. So I had no intentions of doing any of that. They happened. I was a associate pastor of a small church in Gary at the time, an AME church, and I thought, I should learn more than just telling people what I think to be true. I should learn some history of the world and history of the places where these people are in this text. And so there you have it.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Kind of slid out of that one, but I like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that.
Well, yeah. I mean, yes, I would say I'm a person of faith, but I just think so many people say they're people of faith that I don't know that it has the same meaning for everyone. We universally say it. I'm like, but I don't know. I see you. Here's an example. I was in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago and um, met a gentleman who has a record, a police record, criminal record. But that gentleman, without knowing who he was initially, went outside this restaurant and brought in people who were hungry and homeless and fed them. Now he's the alleged criminal. And then I passed a church in Atlanta and the doors are shut and people are sleeping on the steps. And so I don't know who's the person of faith. Because right, the guy who's being criticized for having broken a law is all in the newspaper, and it's this terrible write-up about what he did several years ago. They won't remove it, so that carbon footprint digital footprint is gonna follow him forever. But right down the street is a church, and it's closed, and people are homeless and sleeping on the curb, and no one's doing anything for them. But the guy at the restaurant is, and no one would call him a person of faith. But the person who runs the church, they would call him a person of faith. And so that's why I said I don't know. I don't know what the title necessarily means, but yes, but by most definitions, I guess I would be that person.
I appreciate that. And then the reason that I asked, I'm certainly not trying to like dive too deep into
Sure.
your personal life or anything,
No,
or
no.
dig up something, make you talk
Mm-mm.
about it. But the programs, the more that I've heard you talk about them, the more that I've read about them over here, it seems like there is an element of, having to believe in something, having to believe had to have that hope,
Yep.
believe in a
Yep.
higher power that
Yep.
there is something out there that you're striving for. And I just wondered if there was maybe a faith base or even an influence in the
Sure.
way the program was made. So
Yeah, yeah, certainly. And again, you can ask me whatever. I feel like I want to be cellophane. So whatever you like, whatever you want to know, you can ask. As I said, because at the end of the day, Rory, if you're the last person I talk to, you're going to be the person to say, well, who was Nate Turner? And so I would like for you to be that consistently people say, oh yeah, 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 Rory, I knew him. You're right. He was just like that. So I'm fine. You can ask me whatever. I would say this. My name, Nathaniel, is Hebrew. It means gift of God. It's an intentional name that my parents gave me. So for the entirety of my life, people have been asking me one or two things. If I was in a church or some religious setting, people would say, hey, do you know what your name means? Yes, it's Hebrew for gift of God. Okay, you know that means how you're supposed to behave, Nate. Got it. But my name is also Nat, as in Nat Turner. And then there's another segment of society would say, do you know who you're named after? Yes, the revolutionary Nat Turner, who did some things that scares a lot of people back in those days. Yes, no, I'm not running around lopping people's heads off. I'm not doing any of that. but but am I supposed to be revolutionary in some fashion? Yes. Am I still supposed to be a gift of God? Absolutely. So I would imagine that as an amalgamation of all of those things, it comes out in the way that I deliver the work that we
gotcha. All right. I love that your name has that many meanings. Mine
do.
does not work. Yeah, I was named after my father, who doesn't look like me at all. And my first name, Rory, actually means rugged and redheaded.
Okay. Well,
And I'm Sicilian on my mom's side, and that took over. So,
but you're still rugged. You're still rugged.
I'm a little rugged, brother.
All right, I got it.
All right, great. So, okay. Now you did. I'd like to segment to this one because I don't want to miss this one.
Okay.
You did a TED Talk, and
Mhm.
the topic of it was "We owe Gen Z an apology."
Mhm.
Now, I wish that I had time before I got on with you to have gone and listened to that talk because I'd
No
love to
worries.
hear it.
Sure.
But tell everybody what that was about and why you think, we, and I assume by we you mean Gen X, owe Gen Z an apology.
So at the time I was thinking about all generations prior to Gen Z.
Okay.
And I'd say that because so what happens with every generation, and you know this, I'm a member of Gen X, and the baby boomers would often say stuff about Gen Xers. You all are lazy. Everything you all make everything easy. You never had to struggle for anything. And the generations before that, right, would always say something about the most recent generation. And I would hear, I was starting to hear the same thing about uh, Gen Z at the time. The initial description or definition of Gen Z included people in 1995, which was the year my son was born. So when people asked me what I thought about it, I said, "Well, this is ridiculous because what you're complaining about, if you we believe in trees and fruit, then you're mad that you produced something that you don't like. So why are we just antagonizing the fruit? And as
Wow.
you tell people, I have never seen an apple tree have the audacity to complain because an apple is bruised and I've never seen anyone who gets an apple that's bruised or rotten to go back and cut down the tree. So, right, so like because you believe that the tree is capable of doing better, and so why don't we just be responsible as trees? We can apologize. We haven't done this thing right. So let's do better. And that's essentially the point of the talk, that every generation complains about the previous generation, and all generations are an outgrowth of the older generation.
I like the tree and the fruit analogy. I mean, you can go a lot of places with that.
A lot of places. Yep.
Yeah. So
Yes.
that definitely works, man. All right. So I know you've also said a couple of things here, like parenting ain't for the lazy, and letting kids be kids is one of the biggest lies you've ever heard. Go for it. I can't wait to hear those.
So I think I mentioned to you that I write every day, and one of my journal entries I wrote about this ideal I have about Planned Parenthood. So join me with on this the imagination for a second. I imagine that Planned Parenthood is not the place that people argue about depending on which political side that they're on. I imagine Planned Parenthood is a place that parents go to plan on being a parent, and that these little souls that get to come to Earth get to decide while the parents are in this place called Planned Parenthood. This becomes sort of like a boot camp, whether or not they want to come to Earth, because they have to make sure that the people who are parenting know what they're doing. And so my answer to your question is a long circuitous way around, is to say, yeah, it's not for the lazy, but most parents don't understand what it means to be a parent. They simply think that because we have organs that produces children, that then qualifies us as parents. And yes, we are all parents, but you and I are not the same parent as everybody else. And in some ways, I don't want to be associated with people like, again, with the faith issue. I don't want to be associated with that same label because some people do nothing. And that's what I'm saying. So parenting is not for the lazy, and parenting never ends. And you know this, it never ends. I am always going to be my son's parent. As long as I'm on this planet, I'm always going to be his parent. And hopefully, I'll always have something to share with him because I've been on this earth a little longer. So I just don't think it ends. And I just think parents don't understand the significance and importance of the job.
No, very, a lot of good advice coming through here right now, and I really appreciate that. I know a lot of the fathers out there kind of nodding their heads along with you, going, you know what? Yeah, yeah, that makes sense, you know. Um, in regard to your program, Backward Design,
Mm-hmm.
the Life Template, you do offer a free resource, the Life Template Starter Kit.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that. What's that for? Who's that for?
It's for anyone who's trying to figure out how to get to where they want to go. If you're a parent and you have a child and you're trying to figure out how to help your child get to a particular place, you could pick up the starter kit. And again, it's just a thing to get you to start thinking about what it is you need to do, maybe who it is that you need to have be a part of your child's life. If you are like the 40-year-old who says, I don't know what to do, I want something different, it's a place for you to pick it up and figure out, again, where you want to go and maybe the people that you need and things you need in your life to get to where you want to go. Like, all of us have people, places, and things that we need in our life to help us to get to a particular destination. And that's what the starter kit is exists to help you to figure out.
Nice. And where can they find that? Because it's a free resource. So it's located
It's
where?
right on our site, and I think it says in a section called resources. But it's a free resource. It's right there.
Okay, good deal. And I've got your site and whatnot in your Podmatch profile, right? So
You
I'll
do.
put those
Yep.
out. I'll make sure all that stuff's in the show notes. I do have another question for you if you have a minute.
I guess not much time you want to take, brother. I'm having a great time.
Okay, I appreciate it very much. The there's a ton of research in this.
Hmm.
There's a whole lot of thought and thinking things through and just examining parenting, examining your own parenting, examining, parenting that is opposite of what you believe in. I mean, there's a lot that goes into what you've created here.
Right.
Where does this come from? What makes Nate wake up one day and go, you know what I'm going to do? I'm gonna dig into all this and I'm gonna create this thing. Where does it come from, man?
All right. So I told you I was going to tell you the story, and this is the truth.
Oh, here it
This
goes.
is the truth. Rory, I did not want to be a father. I did not want to be a father. And I'm going to try to tell you the story without breaking down and crying because I don't know that your listeners want to see or hear a grown man cry. Um, I had a tumultuous relationship with my father growing up. So much so that I because my father didn't have a relationship with his father, and my father and I didn't have a good relationship. I figured, trees and fruit. I am destined to be my father. Rory, I even went and looked for my father's father one day. I'd never met him. And I found him in Lima, Ohio, and I drove to Lima, Ohio to meet him because I was curious about this man that produced my father. And I ring the doorbell, and he comes to the door. I comes to the garage, and he looks at me and he says, "How can I help you?" And I was like, "Oh, yep, you're my dad." And I said, "Yes, sir. You don't know who I am, probably, but you do know Tommy Turner, don't you?" He says, "Yeah." And I said, "I'm his son." He says, "Oh, oh, oh my," and goes back in the house, goes back in the garage, and goes back in the house. His wife has to come out, and she says, "Hey, Nate, come on in, baby." And I don't know these people. I know them as much as you and I know each other right now. And that was the only time I've ever talked to my father's father. So after having met him and having known the relationship I have with my father, there was nothing in the world that would make me want to have a father. I got married, and this woman, kindly enough, thought I was good enough to marry. And one day she started talking to me about her biological clock ticking, and she said, "Hey, I already have a child." I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I don't think so." She said, "Nate, like I'm approaching 30, and my biological clock is." I said, "Hey, your biological clock is digital, baby. You cannot hear it. Don't worry." So, so yeah,
All right. I
yeah,
wish I could have been a fly on the wall to see how well
you're
that
right.
went over.
You know it didn't because I'm a father, right? So in June of 1994, she takes me to see this animated movie called The Lion King. And unbeknownst to me, I'm sitting in the back of the theater with her and sort of embarrassed that I'm in an animated movie because I'm this tough guy from Gary. And what would I be doing in a kid's movie? What am I doing here? What are we doing? And the movie ends, Rory, everyone leaves. And I sit there and I cry for about 30 minutes because in that movie, I saw how to be a father. And that was what made me want to be a dad. Mufasa. The whole, every element. So you say, "Hey, Nate, you've done a lot of research." Yep. All of it started by watching a lion and his cub. Yep.
Wow. I get it now.
Yep. Everything from the naming ceremony to the creation of a village. Because if you remember in the beginning, there's all sorts of animals that are out there greeting Simba. And I realized, hey, I should be able to raise a child that reverences his entire village, but that the village also has reverence for it too. And the village can't just be people who look like me. They have to be people from all walks of life. Because if you're going to serve something greater than yourself, you can't just serve people who look like you, who are from your quote unquote tribe. So we waited 8 days to name him, just as unknowns to most people did in Lion King. We waited, and then we picked a name, and we gave him a name that we expected him to live into and up to. And so yeah, so we created this thing called a starting five. So he would always have five people that would be a part of his village, just like Simba had Rafiki and Zazu, etc. So yeah, all most of what you see was born out of me watching an animated movie.
Wow, man. I mean, that's one of the best animated movies of all time.
Yes,
So,
it
I
is.
mean, there is
Right,
that. It's
right, yes.
not like it was just some,
No,
cartoon or something. I mean,
right.
you weren't watching Ren and Stimpy and trying to figure out the whole world. So, but that was some incredible writing in that movie. And
Absolutely.
yeah, wow. All right. What part of that movie, I mean, is there a line or a part of that movie that just sort of like really hit you that you will never forget?
Absolutely. So there's the part where Simba goes down to the elephant graveyard. He's not supposed to go to the elephant graveyard. He takes Nala with him, and Mufasa has to come and save them. And he tells Zazu to take Nala home. And Simba's like, oh shoot, I'm in trouble now. And he says, Simba, let me tell you, right? And then at the end of this whole disciplinary moment, Simba says, but dad, you're not scared of anything. And he says, son, I was scared that I might lose you. And he says, but dad, we're pals, right? And he said, yeah, we'll always be pals. And then that was it. And I thought, I wasn't my father's pal, and my father wasn't my pal, and my father disciplined me all the time. But at the end of the discipline wasn't this kind of love that I needed. He gave me great lessons. There's no question. I can tell people many of the things I do today or believe in come from the things that I didn't really have reverence for from my father because of the way he delivered it. And I'm like, I would love to be able to have a relationship with a child that one day the child will consider me his pal.
Wow. If you listen to any of my old stuff, man, you and I know that we have a lot in common. So, wow, that's that's actually quite a story, brother. That's where that all came from. And that's what you're doing now. This
That's
is what you're doing. This is
That's where he came from. Yep. So I started writing him after that. I started writing this unborn child notes about what I wanted to happen for that child's life. I didn't know we were having male or female, and then he was born. I kept writing him, and the reason I'm here with you, I just want to lead into that. The reason I'm here with you is because I wrote him letters, and I wrote him letters. Uh, Still write him throughout his life, but I wrote him enough letters that when he was 16, I packaged the letters in a binder because as a junior in high school, he decided that he no longer wanted to attend high school, that he wanted to chase his dream of playing professional soccer. So he packed his bags and he moved to Brazil. And so I took the letters that I'd written him and put him in a binder, and I gave him the letters. And so I spent a few days in Rio by myself because I'm convinced every man should go to Rio by himself for a few days. Or if you haven't done it, I convince you should do it. And so my wife called me. You're having too good of a time in Rio, aren't you? No, 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 no. This is terrible here. She says, you're gonna have to go back to the academy where he was. And I went back and she says, he's not doing well. And I was expecting him to have his bags packed to go back because he's 16-year-old. He says, I said, are you okay? Your mom sent me back here. And he says, no, I'm good. Can I ask you a question? And I said, sure. He said, did you put the letters in a particular order? I said, no. Why? He said, because I reread the first three, Dad. I remember my purpose. I'm going to be fine. But whenever I return, we're going to take these letters and we're going to publish them. And I want to share them with other families because, Dad, they need to know what I know. That because when you tell me something, not only do I believe I can do it, I know it's going to happen. And so he came back 18 months or so later because he unfortunately had a concussion, and he published a book, and we called it Raising Superman. And it is that book that put me, wherever I am in terms of talking to parents or fathers. It was that book that made people say, hey, why would you write a child letters? And I was like, well, let me tell you. So um, that's how it all started. Thanks to a
raising
child.
Superman, huh?
Super, Supaman, because I cannot get sued. And so, yes, and it's Ebonics. And most children can't, as you know, pronounce some letters like R's. So
Right.
he would say super. And I was like, hey, man, don't worry about it. You, my Superman. And so it just stuck. So I talked to him earlier today, And I still to this day, I still call them soup. Yep.
That's great. Wow, man. I mean, that's a story. That is quite the program you have going on. Um, in the interest of time, I hate to do it because I could sit here and probably talk to you about our childhoods all day. I think we have way too much in common. But let me go ahead and kind of wrap things up. I'm going to give you the
Okay.
floor, okay? And I'm just going to say, is there anything I didn't ask you today? Is there anything that maybe we talked about and you want to drive home, a little further? Is there a nugget or piece of advice you want to leave for the audience that we have? The last few minutes are yours, my friend.
I don't. So I want to start with this. I just want to tell you I'm grateful. Like I don't know that you don't know me, and I don't know if it comes across genuinely. I am absolutely grateful. This has been a wonderful. However long we've been last hour, it's been a wonderful hour. I hope to connect with you again. If you're in Indianapolis, I fully expect you to let me know so I can buy you a meal. I'm hoping we can do that. Um, Beyond expressing gratitude, I don't really have anything to say. Maybe to ask parents to do two things. To one, to ask and answer, if the world were perfect, then what? Because I want them to ask the question where they remove any trials, any tribulations, any obstacles that we immediately put in our way. If the world were perfect, what kind of person would you be? And if you're a parent, what kind of child would you raise? And then the second, I borrow from Barbie because I love movies and I find interesting things in movies. I would ask people to ask and answer for themselves, what were you made for?
I like that. I like
That's
that.
it. That's all I got.
Nice. Nate, thank you, man. And thank you for the kind words. And I'm in Indianapolis on and off, so I will absolutely look you up, man. I would love to, have a cup of coffee
I'm gonna
with you
give
at
you my
lunch or
phone
something.
number.
Okay, wonderful.
Absolutely, I'm gonna give you my phone number. So please, please do.
Looking forward to
Hey,
it.
y'all
Sounds good.
heard it. Everybody heard it. If you
That's right.
don't do it, I'm gonna go on your DMs and your feeds and tell him he lied.
That's well, he said he's buying me lunch, so the same thing. Okay, when I go
I'm
down
gonna
there
buy you lunch
and he
or
hands me the
dinner, whatever
check,
you want.
that's right. That's
Whatever
right.
you want, wherever you want to go, brother. It's on me.
Yeah, we were just talking about how I raise shot putters and discus throwers, man. I mean, dinner's important. Right? We don't play. So,
Come on down. I
all
got you.
right. Appreciate you. All right.
I appreciate you.
Father, father, designer of the backward design, the life template, TEDx speaker. I tell you what, Nate Turner, thank you so much for coming on the show and for just sharing everything about yourself, what you're doing, why, and why it's important for everybody else to give it a look. Folks, you got a free resource here, the Life Template Starter Kit. The website's going to be in the show notes. Nate, thank you again for coming on.
It's
Grateful
been
to
my
you.
honor. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Folks, this has been another episode of the Power Man podcast. And when the reason we bring powerful men like this on here to talk about these powerful subjects, talk about our children and raising them with purpose, things like that, is because we are all about helping every one of you to succeed in your purpose, in trying to protect, provide for, lead your families better tomorrow than we are today, trying to be a better man, a better husband, a better father tomorrow than we are today. And the reason that we want to do that, the reason that you want to do that is because you and your family, you have value. You're worth it. And at some point, you just have to believe it. Until next time.